Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session on building resilience for semiconductors for insights from visionaries and policymakers on the recent policy incentives. Please note the session is being recorded. You may drop in your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, let me hand over to Hitendra Dave, General Manager and CEO, HSBC India, to share the opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Louisa, and good morning, everyone. And I cannot tell you how happy I am to be here with all of you on a topic which is extremely important and very relevant. And I think, therefore, this session on building resilience for semiconductors, a policy perspective, I think we've all read a number of articles over the past few months on the issues surrounding chip shortages, maybe caused due to the surge in demand on the back of government spending everywhere, maybe due to production challenges linked to the pandemic, maybe due to logistics issues, but whatever be the reason, and I hope some of that will come out, I think it's very clear that policy authorities everywhere in the world need to look into it. And we know that from an India perspective, we are doing everything possible to ensure that there is resilience in this particular product, which has implications for, it might be a small chip by itself, but it can stop the production of a very large ton truck, for example. So I think it's very relevant that we all be here. It's great to see so many participants from all over the world join us, people from the industry, people from the policy making circles, people from the government circles. And I really hope this session does provide a lot of insight into the topics that we need to get into. But just for some context as to why this is relevant, we know that the auto industry by itself is estimated to have lost or foregone revenues of almost $200 billion since this supply shortage of semiconductors surfaced. I mean, that's a huge number. Even in a country like India with a relatively smaller auto market, I'm told that the rate of growth has come off very sharply, largely due to this. And it's not just about production numbers or foregone revenues. Right? As you produce less, you eventually inevitably have a labor impact as to what are you going to do with labor, which is sitting there idle and not doing the job that they're supposed to do. So it's very timely that we pick this up. I think just moving away from the broad, well-known issues of shortages, I think it's very pleasing to see the government of India, and in particular METI, I think really take a very proactive stance to put aside $10 billion. It's not a small number by any stretch, right? $10 billion for either design-linked or production-linked. And let's face it, production-linked is, if we get the design linked right, we actually can start producing chips and semiconductors, not just for the use of our industry here, but for industries globally. And also, we know that the world also wants to diversify a little bit and de-risk its concentration, geographical concentration risk. So it's hopefully a great time for all the participants to share their views. I hope this will be an interactive session. I think this particular session will be chaired by Joint Secretary Mr. Saurabh Gaur. And I would really, really encourage all of you to make sure we use his availability with us, our presence with us, to share your thinking. I've personally had the privilege of spending time with him, one of the most open-minded people you will get across in the government system. And this government itself is very open-minded, so it's great to have that combination. In conclusion, I just hope that I can also learn more from the various participants and the industry representatives that we have here, the experts, industry association chairs, at HSBC or as the representative of HSBC in this forum. All I would like to say is that we are there very much to help you connect India to the world and the world to India, to help you with your banking services here, to help you with your policy engagement and advocacy issues, or any other way that a global bank like ours can ensure that your business in India is settled in smoothly. With this now, I would now like to welcome Mr. Saurabh Gaur. Just a brief introduction on him. He's an electronics engineer from IIT Roorkee and an IAS officer of the Andhra Pradesh cadre, 2002 batch, so 20 years. Congratulations, sir. He currently holds the position of Joint Secretary in Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, or METI, as we all of us refer to it, in case it was not specified by me earlier. And he leads the Industrial Product Promotion, Electronics and Hardware Manufacturing Division, IPHW as it's called, of METI. He's very well known to anybody who has got anything to do with electronics and semiconductors. I think your representatives in India will know him very well. He's known as the key architect of the PLI scheme for promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors, and modified electronics manufacturing cluster scheme, EMC 2.0. And we thank him for his attendance here, for his leadership to this sector, and for his contribution to ensuring an Atmanirbhar India. With that, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dave, for very kind words and a very kind introduction also. I believe we have the presence of other esteemed panelists also, so I'll keep my initial remarks short. While there is all this talk about the semiconductor opportunity that has come, and there is almost a huge race among nations to claim leadership in this particular segment. And while there is the word semiconductor opportunity, my job here is to talk about what does it mean for India and how can India claim a position of eminence and leadership in next 20 years in this. The Honorable Prime Minister, he said about his vision for New India that we should make policies which have 25 years as goals, and keeping in mind that what are we going to achieve in the next 25 years. So with that and the fact that India is emerging as an economic powerhouse, we are the fastest growing economy. We have the highest number of internet. We have among the almost 750 plus million numbers of internet users. We are among the global leading fintech adopters. Our startup ecosystem is very valuable and prospering, and almost every month we have 3 to 4 unicorns coming up now. And the fact that we are attracting huge FDIs also. In fact, while it has taken 14 years to get to $500 billion of FDI, it has taken just 2 more years to reach $750 billion of FDI. So the fact that we are becoming preferred destination globally for investors, our FDI has increased by 40% in last 5 years. We are improving significantly in ease of doing business also. Electronics manufacturing sector also has been growing at almost 17% CAGR. So with COVID notwithstanding, I'll not be actually making a presentation. I'll quickly run through some of the numbers and then I'll pull up the relevant slides based on the interjections. But electronic manufacturing has grown from $29 billion to $76 billion. So all of it has had a huge impact in terms of where we are today in electronic manufacturing in the entire world. And how do we go further from here? From $76 billion, how can we aspire to become 10% of global electronic manufacturing in the next 5 years and reach $300 billion? And from there, how to become the next 10% in another 5 years from now? So that is something that the entire nation is putting its energy behind, the entire government. And the fact that $30 billion, Hitendraji talked about $10 billion, but we had $30 billion of fiscal support getting committed for electronics sector, either directly in form of the production and incentive schemes that came out for mobile phones. And the mobile phone scheme attracted big global companies such as Apple through its CMS players, say Foxconn, Pegatron, Wistron, and Samsung by itself. And if they are committing 20% of their global production volume to India in the next 5 years, I think we are now sowing the seeds that will eventually grow into trees, or essentially we will have the entire ecosystem getting rounded up. Similarly, for IT hardware also, we had a production and incentive scheme. And again, here we have been able to attract HP, Dell, Acer, Asus, companies such as these to make India a significant portion of their electronic manufacturing. And then we had schemes for associated sectors also, whether it is for lithium-ion batteries, for automobile and auto components, for telecom and networking equipment, for renewable energy, that is for solar PV modules, for white goods. So almost $20 billion of schemes have already been announced and companies have been selected. And now on top of that, we have now $10 billion of Semicon India program. which is looking at supporting all aspects of semiconductor manufacturing in India and design in India. So while we move beyond the narrative, there is a cultural transformation that is happening in India. The transformation about making India achieve its rightful place in global manufacturing, becoming the world leader. And you will see more and more of it happening in sector after sector. And semiconductor today is a foundational piece for electronics and for many other sectors. We talked about the shortages that auto industry faced because of a chip not being there and the entire car or entire automobile getting stalled and not coming out in the market. So to alleviate that and to look at where does the India semiconductor opportunity lie, and the fact that we have to move beyond the broad spectrum opportunity that exists for semiconductor manufacturing to what is the India semiconductor strategy and opportunity, and how do we move in phases. In the first phase, which we call the startup phase, essentially, or startup of the semiconductor phase, where we leverage our design strength. We have 25,000 design engineers, and we have lots of designs coming out of India. So how do we leverage that and execute strategy, have specific work streams? So whether design is a work stream, packaging is another very important work stream. So semiconductor packaging, how do we ensure that we get chips coming out of India by setting up advanced packaging facilities and also conventional packaging? And then moving on, so we demonstrate mission viability through this and have some early wins in terms of semiconductor packaging, very important Indian designs, and also meanwhile attract semiconductor fabs, at least 2 of them, to come to India in the next 5 years. So we are looking at giving approvals to at least 2 semiconductor fabs, and to such fabs 50% of project support is made available. So a fab which is coming up in India, and here I will probably take the liberty of sharing a screen also, the fabs that are going to come to India, if we can essentially provide them with 50% of project support. So 50% of project support here means support for not just building the fab, which is in terms of the plant and machinery, clean rooms, the building structure itself, the utilities, the equipment, transfer of technology costs, R&D costs, but also support for 6 years continuously thereafter in terms of constant technology upgradation, tooling, machining, everything that goes into that. So 50% of project cost getting supported over next 6 years, up to node size 28 nanometers or lower, and having one fab, each of the fabs going up to 40,000 wafers per month minimum in next 6 years. And this is what we are aiming at. We have achieved good traction, and will hopefully demonstrate some early wins in terms of being able to select 2 companies in next 3 to 6 months, and giving them all the regulatory clearances also. And if the companies are looking at node size above 28 nanometer to 45 nanometer, 40% of project cost is available, and above 45 nanometer to 65 nanometer, 30% of project cost is available. So almost $2 to $4 billion of project cost being subsidized or being supported, fiscal support being provided for each of the fabs over the next 6 years. That is a very ambitious vision that we have set out for ourselves, and a support that is in line with, if not better than, the support that any other competing economy is offering. Similarly, for displays also, we are looking at for TFT LCDs and for AMOLED technologies, up to 50% of project cost getting supported. And similarly, support is available for specialty semiconductors also, 30% of budget cost being of capex being supported for specialty semiconductors, which is the compound semiconductors, the silicon photonics, sensor fabs, and so on and so forth. There is a Semiconductor Mission that has been set up, which is a dedicated institution with expert leadership. And we are looking at global companies, global Indian citizens, essentially Indians across the globe who are in technology leadership in different places to come to India and be a part of this mission, lead the mission, and in the near term execute the programs, in the long term have sustained engagement with industry. So we are looking at it as a quasi-strategic, quasi-business mission, which will essentially look at the entire ecosystem as a whole, partner with state governments, enable research and capacity building programs also. We are looking at 85,000 new engineers also to be, new personnel also to be trained. 5,000 people in semiconductor research with PhDs, 25,000 people with their bachelor's and master degrees, that is their undergrad and grad degrees, and in collaboration with the universities abroad, and then 50,000 people who are having the experience to work on the shop floors, to handle machines, to work with equipment like that. Apart from that, we will look at what is the total addressable market in India and do demand aggregation. So what is the market opportunity due to our smart cities, due to the proliferation of IoT with 1 billion connected Indians, the almost a few billion IoT devices, if not more, coming into play, and our national missions towards smart metering, the smart water grid that we are setting up, the smart electricity grid we are setting up. We are looking at 250 million smart meters to get embedded in Indian ecosystem. Similarly, we are looking at huge penetration of CCTVs in India. The fact that we are going to make almost 1 billion from the 330 million mobile phones that we make today, can we go up to 1 billion mobile phones being made in India? Similarly, almost $40 billion worth of manufacturing of IT hardware in India. These are all Indian opportunities, and the total addressable market is going to be huge. So all of it will lead to almost $65 billion of semiconductor opportunity in next 5 years, $110 billion of semiconductors in next 10 years. All of these things coming together, and then having the high-tech clusters also. And so we are looking at providing, say, 500 acres of land, providing almost ranging 50 MVA to 100 MVA of power, high quality power. Also 10 to 50 MLD of water, semiconductor grade water, and also mechanisms to handle the wastewater, and natural gas requirements to be fulfilled. All of these coming together, we are looking at parcels in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, in Telangana, in Gujarat, in Andhra Pradesh. So we have identified this 6 to 8 clusters, and we are enabling conversations of companies with these clusters also, with the state governments also. These are some of the clusters which are already there. For example, the ones in Andhra Pradesh, in Tirupati and Sri City, the one in Gujarat, the one in Telangana, and the one in Karnataka, where we have a common facility center also. So all of these things coming together, and the fact that we have a huge talent and R&D ecosystem in terms of our IITs, our triple ITs, Indian Institute of Science, and we have almost 1,000 plus universities, all of which are going to partner in this program. So what it is meaning is that we have a very broad spectrum of activities to be carried out. It is indeed very complex also. That is where mission will play a huge role. But we are looking at very deep engagement with the companies that are looking at making India their as part of their own expansion plans, or as part of setting up facilities in India. We will roll out the green carpet for them. We will ensure that they will have an experience, that the companies which are in India will have better returns on the capital employed, better EBITDA, and definitely much better experience than the rest of economies that we are looking at. And I believe this is the time for India opportunity, and we are prepared from government side to offer that deal to the industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable insights. I would now like to call upon Shri Pankaj Mohindru, Chairman of India Cellular and Electronics Association, to share an overview of the 2026 Vision Document for Electronics Manufacturing. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Gaur, Mr. Dave, Raghav, and congratulations to HSBC for doing this deep dive, which is excellent stuff for the industry and stakeholders to come together. after it's very rare that somebody in the government is running ahead of the industry, and here is an example of a bureaucrat who's taking leadership as almost like a CEO for the sector, which works very well for the industry and very well for the nation. We had come out with two vision documents, which are MATI and ICA joint effort, and this is broadly the principle of 4, like what the Joint Secretary said, that we are aiming for 10% of the global manufacturing of electronics, and then going ahead. So there is a 25-year program, and there is the next 5 years, and then the years after that. So the $75 billion, which we are currently approximately, we are at a $75 billion run rate now, that moves to $300 billion. And what is constituting that? The constitution of this number is almost a 4-fold increase in the mobile phone production. You would know that we have steadily grown in mobile phones over the last 5 years. There is a increase of almost 1,300% in mobile phone manufacturing, from a small like $2.5 billion to about $30 billion plus now. That has been the growth. The other sectors have not kicked in. Other sectors have not kicked in that sharply. Let's say the constitution of this $300 billion, how is it going to be? So we are estimating mobile phones to move from 30 to about $120 billion. IT hardware, which is laptops, tablets, desktops, which have not performed in manufacturing so far, to $25 billion. Consumer electronics to nearly $25 billion. Auto electronics to something similar, $23-25 billion. LED lighting, we are hoping to be working very tirelessly to ensure that LED lighting we are global leaders in that. And as Mr. Gaur mentioned, other sectors like hearable wearables, components, telecom equipment, all of this will add up to a 300 billion output. So a 4-fold increase. Now, this large, CBU output obviously has a major component of it has to come from exports, which is we are targeting a 10-fold increase from the current. This year we will be reaching $15 billion. So our share, India's share in global exports, although it's very tiny, but it has doubled in the last 5 years. Currently, we are about 1.2% of global exports, and we, in the next 5 years, aiming to be 10% of global exports. After that, the next 5 years, that is 26 to 31, the projection is that we will be growing another 4-fold, and that's the time the hockey stick effect comes in. Because you would have seen that over the last 50 years, the movement of electronics, there is a concentration in certain areas. For example, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, China. These become, China is today a dominant electronic manufacturing destination. So that is the place we are hoping to achieve. Two very important pillars of this manufacturing growth, massive manufacturing growth, is the development of Indian champion companies, national champion companies, which is a whole policy to build national champions of global scale. This is not a mindset of import substitution, but to build national champions. And these are companies like Lava, Micromax, Dixon, Amber, and even companies in hearables and wearables like Boat. These are the potential national champions who take a significant share of the entry-level market globally. So budgetary support for building their scale, R&D, design. Some of these companies have, their market share has shrunk. So policies to recover and secure domestic market share and building competitiveness and scale in this. The larger component of this $300 billion is obviously, as the Joint Secretary mentioned, comes from global champions, global value chains who bring their lead firms and also bring their partner firms and the component and sub-assembly ecosystem. All this will provide the cushion for a massive development of semiconductors and the battery PLI, which is the ACC battery PLI, and the display. So the core pillars of this electronic industry has also been kicked off with these three policies and the design policy. What we are now also parallelly working on is that beyond this, the core materials which go into the electronic industry, we have started a deep exercise now that how will we secure materials and build Atmanirbharta for the country in materials. I would like to specifically mention to all of you that we are, as a nation and MIT and all of us are working very seriously to improve ease of doing business. So all those issues are being attacked very vigorously. The cost disabilities, which are well known, the high cost of land is being addressed, as the Joint Secretary mentioned. Power, India is becoming an efficient power generator and economical power generator. And the regulatory uncertainties which people faced earlier, all of them are being put at rest. In fact, all the retrospective matters which everybody was grumbling about, they are being put at rest, including the legacy issues. So these are, all the hallmarks of a great global economy waiting to kick off is happening today. You will find us very proactive now. The COVID is ebbing. In international road shows and outreach, that will be a very aggressive outreach program is being planned by MIT, and you will soon see the results of that. Thank you very much for inviting me, Raghav and Mr. Dave, and I'm here to address any questions or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your wonderful thoughts with us. I would now like to call upon Suvir Davda, Director Corporate Sales, Global Markets, HSBC India, to lead the session. Over to you, Suvir.
Thanks, Louisa. So again, a very, very insightful first 30 minutes. I think without wasting too much time, I have the opportunity of having Dr. Kota, who is the Ministry of Economic Affairs at the Indian Embassy in Washington, DC. So the question I have is, what is the US investor pulse on supporting semiconductor manufacturing in India? Have you had the opportunity of interacting with anyone, and are there any initial thoughts on how they are looking at this entire initiative?
Thank you, Suvir. Thanks for asking this question and for this opportunity. Yeah, in fact, US investors have a very positive kind of approach for the whole. I mean, when they hear about the PLI and the initiative taken by Government of India for supporting semiconductor manufacturing. And I would quickly explain in two parts. One is that in the context of ever increasing US-India economic and trade relations and the robust growth. Second one is the kind of interaction happening between the industry from US and India for the last 6 months, especially on the semiconductor area. So the trade relations and economic relationship between India and US, we are all aware now. US is one of the largest trading partner, both in merchandise goods and also services. And with Biden administration's resolve to build resilient semiconductor supply chains, is very a great opportunity, because the kind of a role US is going to play, and the allies like India, they are really looking forward. So it's a new area going to come up in our economic and trade relations. And second part is that as part of the Quad, already India, US, Australia, Japan, they have initiated the dialogue on the semiconductor supply chains. Then thirdly, as we stand on last Friday, the Senate and House of Representatives approved the America Competes Act 2022, and now President is soon going to sign it into law. So the industry and the investors here in US are very much excited, because it's a $52 billion incentives. Because as they expand their manufacturing facilities here and many other, the whole range of supply chain, then they need the partners like India. So these are the 3 points when it comes to US-India trade and bilateral kind of a partnership. And second thing is that the B2B kind of interaction happening intensely. So there are some of the areas, in fact, they are coming up very clearly. One is the defense and critical infrastructure. As we know that about 9 to 10% of demand, semiconductor demand, comes from this area. So India and US are natural allies and trusted partners. So therefore, this area, the industry here is very keen to work with partners in India. Second thing is that one of the challenges in US is the cost. So it's India, even BCG report says that 20% of world semiconductor design engineers sit in India. So with that kind of a skilled manpower available, and so some of these companies are eyeing on that. And thirdly, that the whole semiconductor manufacturing process is so complex, with several segments from design, fabrication to manufacturing and materials and manufacturing equipments. So, and in each of the segment, there are n number of steps, and each step there are different kind of companies are specialized in. So in each areas, there are strengths on both the sides, US and India. Say, for example, in design, US, of course, is a global leader, but at the same time, they have limitations on IP, labor, and manufacturing. So they are looking at in these areas, India will help. Lastly, of course, India's size of the market. In fact, Saurabh and previous speakers also mentioned about the kind of a market India is going to develop. So there, especially the semiconductor intense kind of items, cell phones, ICT infrastructure, and computers. These are the areas. Almost more than 70% of semiconductor usage, the demand comes from these areas. So the industry is very keenly looking at to. Then lastly, I mean, last 3-4 weeks, there is a momentum. They are looking at PLIs offered in India, and the incentives coming through chips for America fund. That's as part of the America Competes Act. So these incentives together, the industry is looking at, because this has to happen in an integrated way. Various supply chains, different companies have to work together, and to build a real resilience into the semiconductor supply chains. So they are very seriously working on that, and in fact, a lot of consultation is happening with some of the Indian companies and the companies who are working here. And next 6 months, I think we will see a lot of practically things happening, and perhaps we'll be able to have a more clear kind of developments. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. The next question, and I see it coming on the panel, on the Q&A tab as well. I know the Joint Secretary has already addressed it, but possibly in some more detail. And after the Joint Secretary addresses it, possibly Afnaz, who's representing the government of Karnataka, can also answer, is around the stable water and power supply. I guess we have said that it's something which is on top of mind, but I guess, sir, the attendees will benefit from some more detail as to how will we address this entire issue around panel and around stable water and power supply, and what can we do to give them confidence that it's actually being looked at quite thoroughly. So sir, first, if you could go, and then I could request Afnaz to take that one. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are very cognizant of the fact that semiconductors is a highly resource-intensive manufacturing. It is indeed the holy grail of manufacturing, and that is where, in a federal system like India, it is the government of India and state governments that have to come together to really crack it. And I did talk briefly about there are 6 locations at least where we have identified. So based on the expression of interest exercise that we did almost a year back, we had gotten responses from industry telling exactly what kind of power requirement do they have, what kind of water requirement do they have, and what kind of other resource requirement is there. In terms of land, there's ample land in India, and there are ample industrial, what do I say, there's a Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, Chennai-Bangalore industrial corridor, and the fact that we have 19 electronic manufacturing clusters across the country. So getting our land, not just for one fab, but for the entire ecosystem to come, and not just 50 acres for one fab, but 500 acres where we can have the elements around materials, devices, and equipment, everything coming there together in the long term, and have sufficient opportunity for expansion also. We are looking at a 500 acre as a benchmark for a high-tech cluster to come up. This is in line with, say, probably a Shengchu or a Woodland Park in Singapore. So those kind of places. That 500 acres being made available of developed land, and on top of that, providing all the internal and external infrastructure, and then have power, let us say, between 50 MVA to 100 MVA in redundancy mode, in the sense that there is a direct feeder connection at a 110 kVA level, and then probably at have multiple feeders connected to that also. So that is the other thing that has been taken into mind. And then the water connectivity. So these clusters that we have identified are in close vicinity to some important waterheads, in the sense either there is a dam nearby, or there is a river, or there is otherwise ample water which is made available. And then the facilities to treat that water and to make it ultra pure water for semiconductor standards. For example, to give the case of, if you take the case of SCL, our only fab that we have, it has been running for now 32 years. It has never had a power failure till now. SCL by itself has, for example, water available from, it has a waterhead from Bhakra Nangal Dam, and there is scope for providing as much water as possible. Similarly, in Karnataka, in Tamil Nadu, in Gujarat, all these places, there's no issue as far as water availability is concerned. And bringing it up to semiconductor grade is something that we are very capable of doing. So there is probably a narrative that needs to be built here, and the perception that needs to be set right. And we are happy to set it right by sharing all the documents, by sharing site photographs, drone photography of the places also, and also inviting people to come here. On the natural gas front also, we have been able to make those kind of arrangements. On the fact that the soft aspects in the terms of manpower availability. So we don't have semiconductor manufacturing experience per se, but we are building programs in association with foundries abroad and also with houses such as IMEC, where we can train our manpower and also have people engaged in semiconductor research that I talked about. So there is a whole lot of activity happening as we invite the foundries and the IDMs to come to India.
Oh, thank you, sir. That's very reassuring. Afnaz, do you want to go next?
Yes, please. Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Afnas. I'm from the Boston Consulting Group. We are engaged with Invest Karnataka Forum, which is the investment promotion agency under the government of Karnataka. And just to build on to what Mr. Saurabh Gaur mentioned, we've been closely working with central government in identifying suitable locations for semiconductor fabs. In fact, we have identified two electronic manufacturing clusters where these fabs can set up with ample water and power availability. In terms of the locations identified, we have identified one EMC in Mysuru, and this location has a perennial water source from Kabini River, and a 20 MLD pipeline is being laid as we speak. And in terms of the other EMC location, which is in Kotur, Belur, in North Karnataka, another 5 to 10 MLD perennial water source from Malaprabha River is envisaged. And in terms of the power infrastructure being provided to these locations, state government is in the process of ensuring more than 99.7% uptime by providing dual feeder power supply from 220 kV substations nearby. And apart from both these locations, the state government also is proposing a location very close to the Bangalore International Airport in Harluru, where 100 acres is demarcated if a fab choose to come to in Bangalore to leverage its design strength, which the Joint Secretary addressed in his initial address, wherein Karnataka is home to 85 plus chip design houses from Intel to Qualcomm and everyone in the upstream semiconductor value chain. Yeah, so that is the infrastructure, both in terms of power and water, state of Karnataka is going to provide to semiconductor fabs coming to the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Afnaz. I'll like to call upon Mr. Ahuja, who is from Cadence Design and is the India MD, around the DLI, or the Design Linked Incentive Plan, which has been introduced for the first time. But basically, sir, if you could just give us some perspective of yours, do you think this DLI scheme and the PLI scheme have some synergies which are important? We already have, I think, 20,000 plus engineers who are working on design activities in India. So considering we already have that strength and we already have that R&D capability, how do you see that ultimately feeding into the entire semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem? And after you, possibly, Sir Gaur, if I could ask you for your views on that subject as well.
Sudhir, I thought I was going to ask a question, but that's okay. No, I think, clearly India's aspiration is not to be a contract manufacturing destination for the rest of the world. We have a large market and we want to build a comprehensive electronics and semiconductor industry. And to do that, we need to build on our design strength, and product definition, product design, product creation has to be at the heart of this overall strategy. After all, we've got to keep those manufacturing facilities full to capacity, right? A fab loses money if it's not operating at full capacity. So that's definitely good. And it's good to see that it's a more comprehensive set of policies that addresses all aspects of the value chain, from design, semiconductor manufacturing, electronics manufacturing, and looking at it both from the setup phase by reimbursing or participating in the project cost, to the PLI, which is the back end. And the PLI has been a very, very successful policy framework of the government of India. So congratulations to everybody who worked together to make this happen. I had actually a question, and this is for maybe Saurabh can shed some light on it. We've had some incubators in India for semiconductor design for some time now, right? We've had FabC, which is at IIT Hyderabad, again supported by MIT. We've had SAFL, which is in Bangalore, which is Karnataka government and IESA. And I think those are the two semiconductor focused or fabless incubators, if you will. They do take care of some of the entry barriers that we are all familiar with. Obviously, the DLX scheme is far more comprehensive than that. But one of the challenges we've observed is that we don't have that many takers. We don't have that many qualified entrepreneurs in India. And for the ones that are there, they are still struggling with raising funding. Doing a chip design takes about 3 to 4 years before it can go into mass production. And it does require several $1 million of funding. And this is an observation I want to share, and I'd like to get Saurabh's perspective on what, if anything, has been provided for in the policy framework, or what the thinking around that is.
Thank you, Jaswinder, for raising this up. Design being India's strength, the fact is that lots of global companies, top companies, have the likes of Qualcomm and AMD, they have their programs in India, they have their design houses in India, but that IP is not owned by India. So while we have lots of trained engineers in design space, there's absence of big Indian companies and design. So we are serving as the back offices of the world. Now, this scheme, the present program, the more comprehensive Semicon India strategy that we have, looks at how do we support design in India by Indian companies and domestic companies. And that is where specifically we have, and I'll probably share from my presentation again, just give me a minute while I pull it up. We have put up a specific design-linked incentive scheme as a part of the program, and this is essentially to support Indian companies which are having design wins or which might propose to have design wins later on. So under the design-linked incentive scheme, the heading is design-linked incentive scheme, in which we have two kinds of incentives made available: the product design-linked incentive and the deployment-linked incentive. The product design-linked incentive is for people who are having a design and they would want to siliconize it, they would want to develop it. So they require EDA tools, they require high quality manpower, they require access to some IP cores, and then prototyping and post-silicon validation. So for all of it put together, we have 15 crores of support made available per company over next 5 years, and which essentially is 50% of eligible expenditure up to 50 crores will be given to them. Now one may argue whether 15 crore is sufficient or not. So 15 crore, let us say, the starter set, and the design wins which are going to be prominent, they are going to be supported further through some other means. So somebody has a LED driver design, somebody has a power management IC design, or a narrowband IoT design, or a smart meter microcontroller design, or an analog digital converter design, whatever. All such companies will be supported. And then companies which are able to finally prove that they have successful products with them, we will be aggregating Indian market for them. For example, again, taking the example of smart meters, or for, let us say, IoTs. X company, whatever sales it does for its own chipsets or its SoCs, SIPs, deployment linked incentive will be provided to them. So if you are doing 100 crores worth of sale in, say, year 1, you will get 6% of that, 6 crores from Government of India to you, going from 6%, 6%, 5%, 5%, 4% in 5 years, up to a ceiling of 30 crores. This kind of deployment linked incentive will be provided. And under Make in India minimum local content norms, their designs will be given preference, and to a certain extent mandated also for use in Indian public procurement, and also in Indian security and safety critical or strategic installations. So that is the support which is available. We're looking at 100 companies to be supported under this particular program. On top of that, a close association with the incubators, like you said, SAFAL and FABSE is very much on the anvil, and we would want that whichever big companies are coming out of there, how do we have more of Sankhya and Cyril and those kind of companies, at least 15 to 20 big Indian design companies coming out over next 5 years, and wholehearted support being extended to them is something that Government of India is very keen about.
Yeah, sorry. We just had a similar question. I think, sir, you answered it. I think there was a question on, people working in the information display field abroad have ideas to make displays in India. How will the government support the R&D and develop prototype and transfer technology? I guess that's the DLI incentives you just spoke about. I don't know if you want to add anything, but I guess this is something which you just addressed.
Okay, later. Yeah, I'm sorry, my phone screen got stuck for a moment. On the display side, I would like to specifically answer that there's a display fab scheme also, which is but more for setting up a fab, say for 60,000 panels per month, almost $2 to $3 billion of investment. On the display, the question that was around ideas to have more information displays in India, made in India, and R&D to support that. There is already a center of excellence in research in displays, in next generation displays, in AMOLED displays and QLED displays at IIT Chennai, and which has been leading this effort along with support from Government of India, and we'll be happy to collaborate and make it as a nerve center to have those design ideas converging there.
Sure, I'll just take on a cue on that one. There's again a question from Mr. Yogesh. What is the future for chemical material manufacturers for semiconductor and display technologies in India? And how do you see the government supporting building new startup entries in this line, sir? So I guess
so on the equipment space and also on the material space, for example, specifically for chemicals and materials, gases, that is where it is not so much electronics, but largely metallurgy and chemicals, and which is again also covered under our scheme. The scheme, while it talks about the semiconductor manufacturing and bring our chips, it supports wafers also, it supports ingots also, it supports the specialty gases and chemicals that go into that. And suppose a company is looking at putting making something like this, then 25% of project support is available to them also. So if you are putting, say, 100 crore rupees in chemicals or materials, 25 crore rupees of capital investment out of that 100 crore will be reimbursed by Government of India. But on the startups, again, come out with your ideas and come out with your thoughts around this, and we'll be happy to get into a discussion. So again, this is a very wide field. All I'm saying is that there is support available for everyone, and let us have those meaningful conversations with each one of you who has a viable proposition in mind, and look at how we can support you.
Sure. One question I had for Sir Dave, and then possibly again Sir Gaur or Pankaj ji can also take about, is on the sustainable and the full renewable focus which is there. We obviously are wanting to go down so much the manufacturing chain. We know how much resources this use. So how do we get this interlinked into sustainable manufacturing such that we are not ultimately, affecting the entire ecosystem? So Dave sir, if you could start, and then we could go to Sir Gaur and Sir Pankaj.
Yeah, no, I think, this is one of the transformational things that is happening outside of, the various topics we have discussed in the last 55 minutes. I think India is having the largest sustainable energy program actually globally in terms of the sheer size. I think the announcement made by the Prime Minister at the COP26 has triggered it even more. And the great thing to see is that it's not just an announcement. You're already seeing follow-up actions and announcements and requirements come through. I think on this score, I think I would, to the participants in this session, I would have to say that I think all banks, especially HSBC, but I'm sure as a representative of the industry, I would say that there is clear commitment to ensure that companies that are building clean, sustainable, green businesses or financing the transition of their existing businesses, because you need the transition finance as well. I think both capital markets, bank loan markets, bilateral loan markets, everything is open, and to the extent that I can, I would like to use this platform to actually encourage people who are on this call or on this Zoom call rather to ensure that they're engaging with their financial stakeholders and partners towards this journey of building cleaner and greener businesses. I think we owe it to our kids. There is no two way about that. But Thank you for asking this question, Subir.
Pankaj or Saurabh, any questions? Otherwise, I know we have 2 minutes. There are some more questions, but on this topic, anything more to add? Otherwise, I could just move to the next one.
No, nothing to add.
Sure. So there's one more question which has just come through. I guess, Sagar, this would be for you again. Does the DLI scheme cover only semiconductor design companies, or can also support electronic system design companies using this policy?
The design and incentive scheme covers semiconductor design and semiconductor related design. So it has a broader understanding to it, in the sense that if there is a board design happening, there is a systems design happening, all of it is also covered. So from chips to boards to systems and overall to the entire products also, we would like to have a liberal definition and engage companies on that.
Sure. Okay, one last one before Louisa, I can take one last one before I hand over back to you. Is that fine?
Sure.
Yeah. So this is for Pankaj ji. That first of all, congratulations on this new the recent vision document on the electronics manufacturing for 2026, where we've set up some pretty ambitious goals around 300 billion turnover of manufacturing and $10.6 billion of exports. How do you think, who would be the top contributors to this, and where do you think again the semiconductor industry what role would they play in this entire ecosystem?
The exports, let me correct, is $120 billion, not 10.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, these are beginning days for the semiconductor industry. The objective is to create the engine of growth with very large scale electronic manufacturing, so that there is headroom for the semiconductor companies. And you see, this is a secular growth across sectors, and there is a certain cozy cushion which is available for strategic electronics, where, as Mr. Gaur mentioned, the smart meters and other industrial electronics, where these domestic companies will have a cushion, they'll have a market available. But that is only a small portion of the semiconductor vision. The larger elements are the mobile phones, IT hardware, consumer electronics. And, it was so encouraging and exciting when Mr. Dave said that he spoke about autos. So as if autos is now almost, and that's correct. So this $1.5 trillion industry is moving towards electronics very rapidly, and our supply chains are very common. So our suppliers are a part of that. So it's a very nice combination that the electronic industry is going to become so mammoth because of electronics and all the other things like IoT and digitization in every part of our life and businesses. So very, very exciting times, very, very exciting.
Thank you, sir. We've just 1 minute over time, so back to Niyati. I think we should be done with the Q&A, and we'll come back on all the other questions which we have possibly separately. Niyati, back to you.
Thank you, Subir. I would now like to invite Sandeep Arora, Vice President, India Electronics and Semiconductor Association, to share the closing remark. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Louisa. And I think I would start with thanking Saurabh ji for articulating, the Government of India's vision. I think he has been at the center of building this policy and attracting the investments India so needs. And I think what we have seen in the last few years from ISA's side, working very closely with the government, is that the government approach is so forthcoming, so open, that a policy like this could come out. And I think this, we are sure, will make sure that India achieves its rightful place, not just in semiconductor manufacturing, but also in making sure that how we contribute to build our presence in the overall supply chains for the semiconductor ecosystem globally, not just for India. And I think what we have here is the opportunity. Pankaj ji, mentioned about the 300 billion vision. I think from a semiconductor standpoint, I think we have a very clear opportunity of getting to about $100 billion worth of output.
from the country by 2030, out of which 50% potentially can be domestic consumption, 50% exports, a mix of manufacturing and design. I think 100 billion is a very good goal to have for us as we make this start. And I think one of the things is that electronics and semiconductors, the last 2 years has shown us that it's not a luxury anymore. It's a strategic component for any country, any industry. It's a base case for all industries. Electronics cut across, semiconductors cut across every industry you can think of, and hence the importance of it cannot be overstated. So thank you so much for all the panelists. I think Saurabh ji has been leading this charge. So thank you, Saurabh ji, for articulating the vision once again and helping people understand, helping the participants understand what the whole scheme is about. And if there are any questions about further details needed about the PLI or the DLI, you can reach out to any of us, Saurabh ji, myself, any of us, and we'll be happy to help and take the discussion forward. And thanks to Pankaj ji also for articulating the vision for $300 billion electronics. And thanks to HSBC for hosting the session and having all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, HSBC team also.
Thank you, sir. With this, we come to an end to this interesting and insightful discussion. Thank you all for taking the time out to attend today's session. If you have any further queries, do reach out to us. Have a great day.